Well, this is really exciting because I'm about to start my journey from the summit to sea. So this is a project I've been planning for about 1.5 years now. And basically what I'm going to be doing is heading down to the snowy mountains and starting on the top of Mount Kosciuszko, which is Australia's highest peak. And then I'm going to be hiking and then mountain biking for probably 4 or 5 days along the top section of the Murray River. And then down near a town called Kosciuszko, I'm going to be getting in my kayak and then spending the next 2.5 months paddling all the way down to Goowla in South Australia to the Murray mouth. So that's about 2,400 kilometers of paddling. So the whole trip all up is going to be about 2,600 kilometers and should take me about 2.5 months depending on how I'm going and how the weather goes as well. So the next couple of days is really just about getting all the gear ready and getting the food ready and just doing all the final planning. So I thought in this video what I'll do is show you some of the gear that I'm taking and answer some of the questions that a few people have been asking me about how this whole journey is going to work. So let's go and jump in the garage and take a look at all the gear. So as you can see, I've got a huge amount of gear that I'm taking with me. And the reason for that is that this adventure is pretty much broken up into 4 key parts. So the first bit is the hike off Kosciuszko, so I need all my hiking gear. The second part is the bike leg, so I need all the gear that I'm going to be packing onto my bike to ride through the snowy mountains. Then when I get to the river and start paddling, the first day or two I'm going to be using my white water kayak because the river is really narrow and very fast, so I want to make sure I've got that maneuverability. And then once the river opens up a little bit, I'll be transitioning into my sea kayak and using that to paddle all the way down to South Australia. So a lot of gear here, and depending on the leg I'm using different bits and pieces, so there's a fair bit of transitioning. But let me show you some of the key pieces that we're going to be using on this trip. So first up, we've got all the hiking gear and all my clothing that I'm going to be using throughout the trip, plus the beginnings of my food collection. So the plan is that I'll be resupplying throughout the trip, but obviously for the first part up in the snowy mountains, I'll be carrying everything I need. And then I've got a big collection of dehydrated meals there. So for various parts of the journey, there won't be any shops, so I'll be living off a lot of that dehydrated food. So for the bike leg of the trip, I'm going to be riding my mountain bike here, which is the Kona Unit X, which is a specialty bike designed for bike packing. And all the gear will be packed in that rear saddle bag, in the center bag on the frame, as well as a whole lot of stuff loaded on the front. So I'll be going fairly lightweight for that first 4 days, just purely because I'm going to be riding up a lot of hills. It's about 1,000 meter gain each day. So fairly lightweight, just to make it more bearable. In terms of the kayaks, so the first couple of days I'll be in my Dagger whitewater boat, which I haven't paddled for many years, but it's designed to be doing rapids and whitewater, and that will just allow me to have that maneuverability around all the trees and rocks and shallow water that I'm predicting will be in the top section of the river. And then I'll be transitioning into the larger sea kayak here. So it's a Mirage 582. It's a Kevlar boat, and it has a huge amount of storage in it. So it's 5.8 meters long compared to the little fella here, which, I don't know, he must be about not even 3 meters long. So in the boat here, I've got a lot of storage. So I've got a rear hatch here, which basically lets me put all my camping gear in the back. And then a day hatch here, which will be where I store my day food and a lot of my camera equipment that I need to be able to access pretty easily. And then inside there is also a bit more storage under the feet pedals, as well as a little glove box that I can stick my sun cream in and my snacks. I then also have the front hatch where I'll be putting things like food, stoves, and a little bit more of that camping equipment and some of my clothes. So a lot of room in there. I actually had to buy a bigger boat to store everything that I needed, because the other kayak we had there, which is the 532, it's about 0.5 meter shorter than this one. So that gives me a lot more storage for the trip. In terms of gear, I've got a lot of stuff around the kayaking side of things. I won't walk through it all, but basically I've got my life jacket or my buoyancy vest and the spray decks to keep the water out of the boat, and a couple of the deck bags that I'll be storing gear in. And because I'm going to be doing the crossing of Lake Alexandrina at the end of the trip, which can get a bit rough, I've also got my bilge pumps and paddle floats, etc. There's a trolley there so I can do the portages around some of the weirs, so that attaches to the kayak and I can walk along with the kayak. And then a couple of paddles. So I take the main paddle I'll be using is the Epic touring paddle there, but I've also got a Mako paddle as my secondary backup that will sit on the deck in case something goes wrong with the other one. And then we have a whole lot of camping gear, so tents and sleeping bags and sleeping mats and chairs and stoves and all those sorts of things, plus things like water filters so I can drink the water out of the Murray without killing myself, and also the most important things like a coffee plunger so I can have that morning coffee on those cold mornings. And then the sort of final pile of stuff is all the technology. Because I'm going to be filming a lot of this trip and I plan to put a video out about once a week, there is a whole lot of stuff here that I need to carry, like drones and cameras and GoPros and the laptop and that sort of thing. So that's pretty much why I had to get the bigger boat, because I had to be able to fit all that stuff in there as well. So there you go, a huge amount of gear to be taking on this trip, but it's all very much essential stuff. But just because it's so complicated, what I've had to do is create a fairly elaborate spreadsheet to highlight which bits of gear need to go on which part of the trip. Plus, when it comes to the actual paddle, I've also done a bit of a diagram just to sort of show which part of the boat each of the bits of gear go, because that helps with the balance of the boat. It just helps remind myself where things go and where I need to find things if I need them. I'm sure that's going to change throughout the paddle, but at least it gives me a good start for those first few days. So a couple of months ago I put out the first video in this series of videos, episode 1 you can see here, which was the plan for this whole trip. And the plan hasn't changed much, but I thought I'd just walk through the route with you again, just so that you can understand where I'm going to be and how it's all going to work. So let's take a look at that. So I'm going to begin the journey on the top of Mount Kosciuszko, which is Australia's highest peak at 2,228 metres. And I'm going to hike down to a place called Dead Horse Gap. At Dead Horse Gap, that's where I'm going to transition to my mountain bike, which will have all my camping gear on it. And I'm going to ride down the Cascade Trail to the valley where the Murray River actually begins. So the whole plan with this ride is to ride on the trails as close to the river as I possibly can. So at the bottom of that valley, I'm going to jump off my mountain bike and, using a GPS, hike my way over to the true source of the Murray River, which is a tiny little trickle at the top of a valley. And then I'll ride back along the ridge line that will take me as close to the river as I possibly can. But this will take me back to the top of Dead Horse Gap, which is a long ride up a hill. And then I head back down into the valley at Tom Grogan campsite. From there, I then continue along the valley to the top of Mount Youngle, which again is quite a decent climb, and follow the ridge line along the Indy Trail, which will take me down into Cancoban. From there, I then actually head back upstream because I want to get to the highest point on the Murray that I can kayak from. So at a place called Big Gurra, that's where I'll transition into my kayak, put all my camping gear and all my food in there, and that's where the paddle begins. The kayaking section of the trip is the majority of the trip, and it's going to be about 2,400 kilometres of paddling. I estimate it's going to take about 8 weeks, depending on how much I stop along the way. But during that time, I'm going to be living out of my kayak, camping remotely as much as possible, but stopping in the occasional town to have a decent meal, a good night's sleep in a bed, and replenish my food supplies. The longest section of the whole trip that I'll be remote is going to be between Mildura and Renmark, and that's going to be about 5 or 6 days that I'll be completely remote with no towns and probably not many people along the way. From Renmark, I pretty much head down through South Australia, down through Murray Bridge, across Lake Alexandrina, and down to the Murray mouth, where I'll be able to be picked up by the family and head back to Sydney. Just checking out the weather for the weekend when I'm starting the trip, and it's looking pretty interesting. There is a bit of a cold front coming through, so let me just show you that. So just taking a look at Windy here, we can see that there's a bit of a front coming through on Sunday night when I'm going to be up on top of the mountain. It shouldn't be too cold. It doesn't look like it's going to be like last week where it was getting down to -14 with wind chill on top of Kosciuszko. But looking at the prognostic charts, here we're looking at Monday, so Monday night, it's going to be a bit of rain coming through when that front pushes through. So it might be a little bit wet. I don't think it's going to snow on me, but yeah, definitely going to be a bit of a soggy ride for the first couple of days. But I guess as that high pushes through, the weather should clear up a little bit. So there you go, everything's pretty much ready to go. I'll be heading down the Hume Highway in 3 days, and as I mentioned earlier, I'm going to be posting videos about every week as I go along the journey, so I can share all the adventures with you in real time. Plus, you can also follow everything on my website at summittosea.live, and on that side I'll be doing my blog, I'll be sharing my photos, as well as putting these videos up. Anyway, I hope you enjoy following me on my journey, and let's hope that it all goes well. Catch you on the water.